Okay, good morning and welcome to the first of our legislative sessions for the year. My name is Walter Conlon. I believe when I started doing this, Henry VIII had just broken with the church. And for those who are new, we have a kind of a format. We try to keep this as the island of civility in the world of increasingly tribal politics. So we have certain rules which were not democratically instituted. Like Henry VIII, I try to rule this operation by divine right. And the rules are basically the legislators will give their short presentation on what they think is important in the current session, and then we'll open it for questions. There'll be no questions other than at the podium. So if you want to ask a question, go up to the podium and wait your turn. Because of the fact we've often had a situation where we have to turn people away because we run out of time, and the time limits will be strictly enforced because the legislators, I believe some of them have other functions they got to go to today, and they can't really stay in many cases, for additional time. Though you're certainly welcome if they can stay to talk to them after the session is over. Limit your questions to 1 minute, and it's a question, not a speech. You get up there and you ask a question. And then the legislators were asking that they limit their response to 2 minutes each. And also, we don't want to have 15 people asking the same question. If the question is already asked and answered, and you're going to ask the same question, please sit down. Now, if at the end of the time we have time and everyone has had a chance to ask a question, we will allow you to get up and give either a follow-up to your previous question or to ask a new question. But I would not bet the farm on the possibility that we'll be in that situation, because usually we have more questioners than we have time to accommodate them. Finally, please keep your questions on state issues. I know we've had some fun in our city council, and of course Washington is always a subject of interest to people, but these people work in Des Moines. They're involved with state issues. Please confine your questions to issues currently before the legislature. There are a couple of other things we need to do before we start. The first thing is the Muscatine Community College, for which we're grateful in sponsoring this, has a student senate representative available. Alejandro Villapando is here on behalf of the student senate. Alejandro, please raise your hand. And also, we have a policy that when we have candidates for any of these offices, we do give them recognition. And Laura Legis, who's interested in or is running for the seat that is currently held by Representative Carlson, is here. Laura, you want to raise your hand? Laura will be available after the meeting is over to answer any questions, get acquainted, et cetera, et cetera. Our policy is we recognize candidates. We do not give them a special opportunity to speak. And with that, I am going to just go down the line. We'll start with Representative Carlson for his brief presentation on what he thinks is the issues before the legislature.
Good morning, and I thought you were going to break out into a rendition of Herman's Hermits or something this morning, but you have to be old enough to know who Herman's Hermits are, I guess. So in the legislative session, so we will, one of the issues that we will be dealing with fairly soon is a deallocation budget of approximately $40 million, I would guess, or in that range, $40–50 million, to adjust the fiscal year 2018 budget, because the revenue estimating conference numbers that we used to pass the fiscal 18 budget last year have now reduced, and we need to get the budget back in line. So the Senate has passed a bill out of their Appropriations Committee. The House has not done that yet. We are working on it. I think our numbers will be less than the Senate bill, and in addition, there will be differences within the line items. I'm sure some questions will come up about that later, so I'll deal with that at that time. Then we'll obviously, deal with the budget. I think that'll be the primary function that we all do. There are a number of other issues that we will deal with this session. We have passed a water quality bill. which I think is I wouldn't call it the first step. It's been referred to as the first step in water quality. We've been doing many steps on water quality for many years. I would just say the bill we passed and sent to the governor was just another step. And there will be continuing steps to deal with that issue for the good of the state. A lot of conversation will continue regarding Medicaid, MCOs, and mental health. I think there'll be a significant discussion on that this year. And of course, education funding will be front and center. So look forward to your questions. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. I'm State Senator Bob Dvorsky from Coralville, and my district has all of Cedar County, part of northeastern Johnson County, 3 precincts in Iowa City, and all precincts in Coralville, and the city of Wilton. That's why I'm here. So I serve on Education Committee, State Government Committee, Rules Administration, and I'm ranking member of Natural Resources and Environment and ranking member of Justice System Appropriation Committee. So I think Representative Carlson lined out sort of things that, major things we've done so far. A little bit of difference in what the Senate's done than what the House has done. We have passed a de-appro bill out of Appropriations Committee. And I think the Senate is cutting 52 million, something like that. I think the House is going to not cut as much. As I understand, that's the debate between the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans on what the number is going to be on what they need to cut. I think they need to cut a minimum of something like 37 million, so the budget balances. So that's going to be debate, or trying to figure out what we're going to do and move forward on that, and we'll have a lot of discussion on that. Education, as I said, I'm on the Education Committee, and at 3 o'clock on Thursday, we did pass out the allowable growth, what I call allowable growth. There's some new name for it, but it's still allowable growth to me. How much increase we give to the schools and for next year, and what passed out of education was 1%. So we can debate on that. I think that's inadequate, but we'll certainly have a discussion on that. Water quality, passed out a water quality bill. It was a Senate bill. It was over in the House. It was sent over last year and held up there for a long time because the House didn't want to. They had their own bill, and they were discussing what to do with it. And finally, this year, apparently they got the votes and decided to move the Senate bill forward. So the governor signed that. I don't know. I would say it's a step sideways. It certainly is a step forward. It's kind of what we've been doing, just a little bit more money put into it. And what we've been doing isn't really working a lot. I mean, as I said, I'm on Natural Resources. One of the people presenting, I asked them, how far forward have we moved? We're supposed to cut back 40% on how much we're discharging there to make sure we have clean water. I said, how much has been done the last several years? 1%. And that's been done in the last several years, and this isn't going to help it a lot. So I think it's kind of a move sideways, and we are going to put some more money into it, but it's not exactly a move forward. So glad I'm here. I'll be happy to discuss any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Senator Tom Green from Senate District 44, which is all of Des Moines County, all of Louisa County, and the rural parts of Muscatine County. I serve on the Education, Health and Human Services, Local Government Appropriations, Natural Resources, and Economic Development Committees. The big issues that I see being addressed this year are obviously what comes close to my profession as a pharmacist, or the opioid epidemic, mental health, declining K-12 enrollment. I think this is a problem. 2 years ago, I haven't had the numbers for 17, but in 2 years ago, we had lost 194 students in my district in public education. So how do we keep families interested and ensured that public education is a primary focus? Well, it is, but when you have declining numbers, that's an indication that there is a problem. So that does need to be addressed. The opioid epidemic, I served on a joint committee this summer with 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate to address this issue, try to come up with some positive steps forward for controlling that issue. Representative Heaton from Mount Pleasant was the chief driver in the House on that, and Dan Dawson, a police officer basically from Council Bluffs, was on the Senate side. Mental health issues are in the headlines every day. We have problems that do need to be addressed. I have a specific proposal as a pharmacist that's hopefully gaining some traction that will help provide a little greater access to providers. When a patient's got a mental health issue and they are in a crisis mode, they need to be seen today or tomorrow. They can't be told it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks before they can get in to see a provider. So I think this might help. Economic development's always a thing. We've got to find drivers to keep families here, create more and better paying jobs, keep our families here, let them grow their families, and keep them in our schools. I mean, there's just a whole gambit of issues to face. And I found it to be challenging, yet I would say my first year in the Iowa Senate was an education. I would like to say up front that I think Senator Dvorsky has announced his retirement from the Senate, and I want to thank him publicly for his years of service to the Iowa citizens. I've always found Senator Dvorsky to be a good listener. His ideas, I always try to listen to him because I know he's a man of wisdom and who has come across with some great ideas. And like I said, I can always tell that he's listening, he's involved, he's doing what he can to serve his citizens, and I just want him to let him know that I appreciate that.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Dave Kerr from District 88, and I serve on the Ag Committee, the Natural Resource Committee, Public Safety. I'm the Vice Chair, and several other committees. First year was an exciting year, a challenging year, to get my feet on the ground and see how legislation moves forward and everything that's involved with it. So it was, I look back and I had more good times than I did bad times up there. I can say that. So what's going on this year? Of course, we got a water quality bill out, and really I'm proud of that we've got something going and finally moving in the right direction with a water quality bill. And I think everyone up here will agree that there's going to have to be more funds put towards it in the future years to address all the needs, and the nutrient reduction program is, I believe, the right way to go with that, through that. Budget, it'll always be an issue here in Iowa, of things going on and how to fund and what not to fund, and income, the de-appropriations part of it is like Representative Carlson said, it's going on, and it's not a fun process, but it's a necessary process this year. If we could just get the farm economy clicking and several others, bills that would relate to internet sales under control, and I hope someday we can, or the federal government can make a decision on how to address that for the states. It's not only Iowa that it affects, but it affects many other states. Just several other bills that I'm involved in right now is bill about 9/11 service that counties provide, and being able to update their equipment through a program that would go to every county can either join in voluntarily or not. I've talked to the ones in Louisa County with the aging equipment that they have in the 911 system. This upgrade would be furnished at help them on their cost of buying all the new equipment that they would need. So I think it's a right step forward. An interesting bill is a drone bill, and that involves flying over our facilities at the penitentiaries, holding facilities for juveniles, not allowing drones to go over and drop contraband, take pictures of the facilities, and I thought that would be a simple bill to run, but there's some people that don't like it, don't think it's necessary. So see how it works up there. It's interesting. So I'm looking forward to this year, and I think we can work together in the House on some bipartisan issues that are coming up. So I'm looking forward to the next few weeks and getting things done, and then the funnel will start in about 2 weeks and narrow the bills down. We'll do a bunch of voting on different things. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for everything.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Lofker, and my district's half in Muscatine County, which is Gary Carlson's part of it, and then Ross Poshins up in Scott County. I am the chair of Economic Development, the Budget Sub. This week we had UNI and we had Iowa State talking about what they're doing to create jobs and a lot of the research they're doing at the universities. And then last week we had University of Iowa. We had Debbie Durham, who's the director of the Iowa Economic Development Authority, that presented and talked about all the incentives. It's a big topic. And we had Chris Kramer, who's with Cultural Affairs. So the directors come in, they testify, and let us kind of know when we're looking at the budgets and everything. I'm on education. I was working on the start date bill, and what it says is that traditionally school can't start before the 23rd of August. And this bill at the state fair, which it completes on a Sunday, so what would happen is this year it would be the 23rd of August is a Thursday, so this would allow school districts to go ahead and start on Monday. And Mike Van Sickle from L&M Schools brought it to my attention, and the problem they have is that there's 6 less days of the first semester than the second semester. It's awful hard to try to get the tests in and all that. And a lot of schools don't even try to do that because it's so difficult. So, but we got that out of the subcommittee, but I'm going to be right up front. It's a lot of people think it makes sense, but there are a few people that are very involved with education that don't want to. It was very controversial last time, and they just don't want to even discuss it. But we'll stay on top of that. I'm on government oversight with Bobby Kaufman. I'm sure he'll be elaborating on a few of the issues we're dealing with there. And so then on Veterans Affairs, I work on a lot of different bills there. I may bring those up a little bit later. And I'm on appropriations, which I know Gary had already kind of mentioned the situation. Basically there's $37 million that we need to de-appropriate, but our bill was 52. What we're concerned about is the Revenue Estimating Conference has been wrong for 2 years. But keep in mind, though, 35 states have had revenues lower than they estimated, so it's kind of been a national thing that's kind of happened. So anyway, so that's the situation is, like I said, we're worried about if the March number is lower, we have to go with that number. So then also I'm on the interim committees. I'm on IPERS, I'm on the 411 plan, I'm on System of Retirement Plans, and the Iowa Economic Development Authority.
Good morning, everyone. State Representative Bobby Kaufman. I think most of you know me, so I'll just get right into it because I had a few topics that I wanted to bring up that won't necessarily come up in questions. I'm sure we're going to have questions on the community college's role in workforce development, education, managed care, mental health, and I'm looking forward to answering those. So assuming those come up, I will defer my answers on those until the questions come up. But as Senator Lofgren had said, I chair the Government Oversight Committee, and we have become an extremely active committee that is heavily involved in a lot of situations that have a direct impact on not only your lives, but also your tax dollars. I wanted to give a quick update on those. Last year, we did an investigation into the Department of Human Services after those 2 tragedies with the 2 young girls that were starved to death in West Des Moines. That was completed last week, and I'm happy to report that we've actually been able to exact some changes. So while that's a horrific, unspeakable tragedy, at least we're able to possibly save somebody else going forward. The system, before this whole investigation, laid out a situation where if you're receiving a taxpayer check for taking care of a special needs child, you were not required to prove that you were taking that individual to the doctor, to the dentist, for basic health care in front of mandatory reporters. Now, 99% of adoptive families are the best people in the world that wouldn't even think of not doing that. But because the system didn't require it, these 2 individuals, who one of them is now going to rot for the rest of her life in jail where she deserves to be, were able to collect a check from you for taking care of a special needs child and not doing anything to make sure that she was healthy. So while it's a complete tragedy that it happened, we at least have that silver lining that going forward, hopefully we can protect the next individual that might have been harmed. We began last Wednesday our investigation into the ICN. That's our state board that provides wireless internet to here, to K through 12 schools, to hospitals. And any of you saw that the director misspent $380,000 of your dollars, including some incredible, arrogant, egregious acts such as, and I won't list them all because I only have 2 minutes, but the most egregious one is that he had 2 semi-trailers full of media equipment delivered to his house, purchased by the ICN, delivered to his house, and he was putting the stuff on eBay. I mean, it's just an incredible arrogance, and conveniently now he had a heart attack and can't talk to us. Now, of course, I hope he heals up from his heart attack, but I find it to be convenient that a heart attack back in July is continuing to prevent him from speaking to the authorities. And then finally, I want to talk about something briefly that Representative Carlson and Senator Dvorsky helped me with, and that is that there was a direct attack on rural Iowa from the Department of Transportation when they attempted to say that they were not going to replace all of the overpasses in the proposed extension of Interstate 80. We were able to get them to agree that that is not good policy, that they will instead offer incentives rather than saying that you will not be able to have those overpasses. And then finally, I've had a lot of EMS folks reach out to me from Muscatine. I'm running the GEMT bill, which is going to be one of the biggest injections of funds into the EMS world in a long time. Our federal CMS, basically the federal EMS funds were made available. The state has to ask for them, and what that means is when our ambulances transport a Medicaid patient, they were being reimbursed at a pennies on the dollar rate, and they were having to absorb those costs within the department. This bill, which I believe is going to get bipartisan support and already passed the subcommittee 3-0, would allow us to get in the front of the line and ask the feds, hey, we want Iowa to make sure we have our share of those dollars. So look forward to your questions, and thanks for being here.
I'm Bridget Cisneros, and I don't have a question, but I wanted to say thank you for all the wonderful work you guys have done.
I'm Rudy Skullikins. I also want to thank you, gentlemen, and especially the kind words that were spoken to the retiring senator. I appreciate that from cross parties. I work for a school district, have done so for the last 20 years. A lot of changes have been made in our financing. At the end of last session, Representative Carlson told us that they were going to change the IPERS plan from defined benefits to defined contributions. To my surprise, this week I read a long article in a newspaper, also by a Republican, who said, oh, we're going to make it better and greater, and we're going to keep the defined benefits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would like to know what the actual plan is then. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to speak for whoever you alluded to, no Representative Carlson. He can speak for himself. But there are no changes being proposed to IPERS. And frankly, I find the politicization of this event to be shameful. To be clear, the House Republican Speaker and the House Republican pension share, of which any changes would have been made, came out crystal clear and said absolutely and unequivocally, we are not changing IPERS. That very afternoon, after he learned of it, a Democratic senator hosted a big press conference and a big fundraiser saying we got to stop Republican scare tactics. Your IPERS is solvent. There is an annual review committee that does review things, but the absolute politicalization of it is downright shameful.
I resent that accusation.
That's okay. It's not an accusation. It's fact.
No,
it's
sir.
fact, period.
I did not politicize this. I'm worried about my future.
There are no follow-up questions allowed until the end of the session.
Then I would appreciate courtesy.
We don't have any back and forth. So,
I-
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
With IPERS, it doesn't look like anything's going to happen on IPERS, but you know, mostly we were evaluating everything to make it secure, to make sure it's there for people. I will say there's some things that we should at least be aware of. The market's gone up about 400% from the bottom, and it's hardly, the funded amount hasn't hardly budged, so that's a concerning thing. And one thing too, back about 20 years ago, they had the limit on covered wages, and it was at 44,000. And so what they did is they upped it to like 175, and now it's at 265. So there's a formula how it's done. They take the top 5 years and all that. It doesn't matter at this point. But the main thing really is that you have, right, I guess what I'll tell you is there's 37 people last year that made a pension or got a pension greater than $100,000. But there's now 5,090 that make more than $100,000. There's 242 that make more than $250. So a little concern that I have is that, you know what, we're starting to kick in some big pensions. And I just don't think, I think I care deeply about the pension that's, the teacher that's got a pension, but am I going to fight like heck to put the plan in a bad position to make sure there's $250,000 pensions? I'm surprised the Iowa State Education Association doesn't support maybe limiting that. So that's just something that we should consider. Also, too, the way that it's we're paying back probably about a third of the money that goes in is paying for the unfunded liability, and we have what basically is based on percentage of wages. So what happens is actually the unfunded liability goes greater before it drops down. And the 411 plan for the firefighters, that plan they basically do a set dollar amount. So the problem with the IPERS plan is it has negative amortization. So what happens is they're paying money in, but they're not paying enough to get it into principal. So I'm just telling you some facts and things to be considering. But again, it's they've managed it well. They've done a nice job, and I know compared to other plans, it is strong. But I would say that when you're 80-some% funded, it's still a really big number to be looking at. So I think we need to be evaluating it and everything else. I think, and as far as going to a defined benefit, or going from a defined benefit to a contributory plan, that's really unlikely. People aren't talking about that. There was some talk about maybe new people, and some people say, well, that would be hard because you have to fund the other plan, which you do. You have to fund the other plan too. So, but I think it's very wise and prudent to take a look and make sure the money's there. I would think anybody that is in IPERS would really be glad that we're looking at these things.
Yes, I believe it was Representative Penegill that come out and said that the plan is solvent and secure. I had funded it, I believe it's 81.4%. So I'm satisfied that we're not going to touch it, and hopefully that it keeps on growing and becomes more secure is my ambition and hope that it does. But then I get thinking, at what point do we really need to be concerned about it? What level of percentage, let's say? We can't let it get to be like Illinois' pension fund or California's or New York's. I think we all agree that we will have to step in and do something for it goes nosedives down like theirs have. So I wouldn't be really concerned about it as long as the funding is adequate. So, and I think many people rely on it. So I'd hate to be the one to say we're not going to do it, fund it, and but we need to keep track of what's going on with it. So thank you.
All right. I appreciate anyone who has dedicated their life and their career to public service, whether it's in our schools, whether it's in our police officers, our firemen. On the IPERS issue, I would not vote for anything that currently would alter what their plans or projections are for their retirement. I mean, I really don't want anyone messing with my 401, so I respect that. I'm worried more about down the road. I am more concerned that for the new employees, I think any new employee should be given an option, whether they join into the traditional IPERS plan or whether they would prefer to go with a quote a 401k plan. So that issue needs to be addressed and investigated. But like I said, for the current employees, those who are public employees today, like I said, I would not vote to alter or affect their plans. If you're 5 years from retirement, you're planning on that, you're banking on that, and it's just not good policy, it's not good governance to mess with people's lives in that matter.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Green, for mentioning that, because personally, I actually am receiving IPERS right now, and I really don't want people messing with it. So, because of years of service in public service, IPERS is one of the best state plans in the United States. I hope people understand that. A few years ago, and I don't know the exact time, but we were looking at IPERS and we needed to make changes, so we made changes on both sides of it. I think they upped on how much employees put in, and they also upped on how much the organizations put in. So we were aware of that a few years ago and changed it so it's on the good course it's on now. And Donna does a great job. They're 82% or whatever it is, 81, exactly 81.4. Yeah. Anyway, that means it's really in good shape, and I think for a statewide plan, IPERS is admired by a lot of people across the country. So if it's not broken, we don't need to fix it, right? So there was some effort by Senator Schneider in the Senate to bring in somebody to look at it, and they looked at it and actually said probably don't need any changes, as I understand it, which was amazing because it was a group that they thought would make recommendations to get rid of it. But I think it's in good shape. But you know, we talked about collective bargaining, and there was going to be a little tweak last year. Well, I hope they're not looking at another little tweak of IPERS. So I think it's in good shape, but people still need to pay attention and watch the legislation that's going on. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I serve on the pension committee and this is my 4th year on the committee. And part of the things that we do on the committee is looking at oversight. And when we talk about 81.4% funding ratio, let's remember what that number is. That is at a point in time that said if all the liabilities of the plan came due at one single time, how much money do you have in the plan to be able to fund those liabilities? Which would mean that at 81.4, that means for every dollar that is a liability, we have 81 cents of assets, which means that the plan is underfunded. And today that underfunding is approximately $7 billion. But the funding ratio, while an interesting metric, and it's a common metric, you know, the assets are all not going to be used on a single day, just as liabilities are not going to be. Not everybody's going to retire exactly the same day. So it is based on the assumptions. But those assumptions are also critically important to understand, are they valid assumptions? So the assumptions, the single assumption has the greatest impact on the funding ratio is determined on what is the discount rate or the rate of return on the investments. Because in IPERS, and although we have multiple state plans, IPERS is by far the largest, that the benefits that are paid to current retirees and for those people that are invested in the plan, but as the benefits are paid, 60% of the benefits are paid through the investment income that is generated by the plan. So whatever you determine in your assumption as that rate of return affects that funding ratio. I've been advocating, while I've been on the pension committee, that the discount rate assumption has been too high. It had been a 7.5% return, and yet the actual return on the plan for the previous 3 years was in low single digits. So if you're overinflating what you believe that return is, you are underestimating what your funding ratio is. That becomes important. Senator Dvorsky's right to some changes that were made in the plan previously. Depending on what the funding ratio is the driver of what the contribution should be, percentage contribution by the employees, but also the employers, whoever that employer record is, school districts, counties, cities, whatever, and the state. And if you don't have that number correct, then you are not putting enough money into the plan to make sure that you can meet all the obligations that you have. I'm pleased that the pension group, because I'm on the oversight group essentially of the pension, that the group did reduce the discount rate from 7.5% to 7%. And you say, well, that's only 0.5%. But believe me, that is a very meaningful number. So I think they have done what they should have done. Now, you know, also other assumptions are mortality rates, inflation rates, wage inflation rate. I mean, all that whole, and they looked at the whole basket of assumptions. They made some changes in some of the other assumptions as well, which was prudent to do, but that, okay. Pensions are a complicated thing. I'll just summarize. I'm glad to talk to you more about Rudy. The plan is on the right path for solvency. The plan is on the right path for the amount of contributions to go in to make sure we meet the obligations of those people who are retired today or those people who are in the plan. The question is what do we look in the future, and maybe somebody else have a follow-up question. I can give the second half of that answer.
Next person, we usually take a break halfway through the proceedings when we're approaching that time. So after the next questions and answers are done, we will take that break. Those who are standing in line can sit down and acknowledge that they will be recognized in their order after the break. Please.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Agapito, and I am the Young Democrats president here at the Muscatine Community College. I would like to address a very important topic today, but first I would like to thank Senator Robert Dvorsky and Representative Bobby Kaufman for accepting our invitation last semester to come to the community college and speak to our students and answer all their questions that they had. Thank you so much. We really appreciated it. Now moving on to the topic, we heard there is going to be a major cut for the community colleges. If it happens, that means students will have to pay more to pursue their education, including first-generation college students and DreamX students, in which case I myself am both. I already know a couple students that have had to cut some of the classes that they were passionate about this semester because they could not afford it already. A couple of new members that just joined the Young Democrats just informed me that the reason that they joined is because they want to make a difference, and not only in their school, in the entire Muscatine County. They want to be leaders, and to cut the funding means you cut their opportunities and students obtaining an education. So in all, I just want to know, where do you stand in this situation, and would each one of you stand for our school? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your question. In the Senate appropriation bill, they had a fairly substantial cut to the community colleges. What was it? $5.4 million to the community colleges. I think in the House, the discussions that we have had, the House has felt very strongly about community colleges and supported community colleges for a long time. The House appropriations bill will reduce that reduction significantly from what the Senate bill was in community colleges. We need the community colleges. They fill a very valuable role for us, a different role in some cases than Regents. Certainly it's a great place for students to get education if they then transfer to a Regent school or another higher education school, but also for workforce development. The community colleges have a very unique role in that. So I think we will see a much stronger support for the community colleges, and I don't believe that the Senate amount that they had in their appropriation bill will stand when it comes time for the final bill to pass. You know, I've served on the Muscatine Community, specifically I've served on the Muscatine Community College Foundation for almost 20 years, which does its sole purpose is raising money to provide scholarships for MCC students, and recognize critically how important the community colleges are, and I feel strongly about that.
Thank you. It is 5.4 in the Senate, and I hope the House does work on that. The workforce shortage in Iowa of skilled workers is becoming an epidemic, and we've been talking about this for years and years, and the answer is putting more funds and programs in community colleges and Regents and other programs. And to go in and cut community colleges makes no sense for economic development in the state, where you don't have the skilled workforce out there, and community colleges are preparing those people. So we cut that. That makes no sense. So I hope they really work at it in the House and don't make those cuts to community colleges. They also are talking about cutting the University of Iowa, just the University of Iowa, $8 million. So we need to make some changes here. This isn't going to work.
First of all, I want to thank you for being involved. I love to see young people involved in the process. You know, it's our future. So thank you for that. Secondly, I'm a graduate of, at the time, Burlington Junior College, which is now Southeastern Community College. And then I got my pharmacy degree from Drake University. So I certainly appreciate and value the foundation that the community colleges give to our students. I think the community colleges educate, I believe, 2.5 to 3 times more students than the 3 Regents schools. I find it easier to cut the University of Iowa. I don't want to say cut, reduce spending, the level of spending. We're going to reduce spending to the University of Iowa, the University of Northern Iowa, and Iowa State University, rather than reduce our funding to the community colleges. I think we get the best bang for the buck at the community colleges. But the bottom line is the pie is only so big. The state of Iowa must live within its budget. We cannot overspend what we do not have. So believe me, I will fight for every dollar that goes to the community colleges. Again, I think that's where we get our best bang for the buck, educates the majority of our students. And if memory serves me right, I'm sure Senator Dvorsky will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the University of Iowa has $1.7 billion in its foundation. Now that money cannot be used but the university can absorb these cuts, these reductions in spending from the state a lot easier than the community colleges can. So again, I will be a strong advocate for the community colleges.
I think you'll find that everyone up here is a supporter of the community colleges. I graduated from back then Muscatine Community Junior College, basically. So, and we're Senator Green and myself are fortunate to have on each end of the district, Muscatine and Burlington, which are doing a fine job helping get the Future Ready program that the governor wants set up and providing training for people. So I think I think you might be surprised what the end results will be with a bunch of guys up here fighting for the community colleges. And like we say, hopefully there's others in the House that I know that are standing up for the community colleges and see the excellent work that they do and the training that they provide. So it's not all over. So look for good things to happen. Thank you.
Representative Kaufman and myself have both kind of advocated for community colleges. Of course, we hear from Jeff Kaufman all the time about it, but it is hard. And I will say with the education, it's $27.3 million from education, but you need to realize there's a big percentage of our money goes towards education. So of course, when you're cutting, it's more is going towards that. But we're talking about 1.1 from economic development. But I'm sure that people with health and human service issues will tell you that they're talking about 11.8 million there, and justice 7.7. So, but I will say on education, I think that we've left. In fact, with our budget last few years, we've left K through 12 harmless on any sort of deappropriation type of bills. So it is difficult. But I will say, out of the cuts of looking at education, we have a hard time cutting community colleges because we do support them. So we'll have to see what happens on that.
Thank you for the thank you. I enjoyed being there, and as the 2005 founder of the MCC College Republicans and co-founder of the MCC College Democrats, I appreciate you being active. I have fond memories right out here of both the College Republicans and College Democrats working together to recruit, and if somebody was a Democrat, I pushed them their way and vice versa. So thank you for what you do as well. The House number is going to be a lot lower, and as far as I'm concerned, it should be 0, to be blunt. We have available revenue for 2019, and with the governor's top priority being workforce development, I think that not only should community colleges not be cut, I think you should be on the list for increases for next year if you're going to be asked to do more of the great projects that you're already doing so well. So thanks for the question.
Thank you very much.
All right. My name is Shelley Servidillo. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I served in the 1st School Floor. I'm chair of the Veterans Caucus for the Iowa Democratic Party, all 99 counties, all 4 congressional districts. I run a constituency caucus within the Iowa Democratic Party, and my job is to give those who are underserved voice. I wrote a bill for veterans who are suicidal. It's House File 482. It's been through subcommittee up at the Hill. This Monday kind of got tabled and sent into limbo. So I'm here to ask for help. I gave you guys a copy of it, and it's really about as simple as it can be. If you've ever seen a bill, one page, here it is. Basically, what we have is 24-hour hold for vets threatening suicide. Iowa's vet suicide rate is 20% higher than the national average for post-9/11 vets. This bill requires a 24-hour observed hold by any veteran requesting admission at a hospital or psychiatric facility due to suicidal tendencies. It does not require any new facility construction, only the physical presence of a nurse for 24 hours. So basically, another thing that we have is in 2014, the last year that I could get statistics, the VA has said that we have 75 veteran suicides in the state of Iowa in 2014. Nobody else was interrupted. Please let me finish. So what I am here for today is to ask for representation for veterans in the state of Iowa from my senators and elected representatives. So in Des Moines, please. Thank you. Nobody else was treated this way. I'm a veteran and a nurse, and I ask for help, please, for the veterans in the state of Iowa.
I'm just seeing the bill for the first time, so I'm not going to commit to anything until I get a chance to read it. I'd be happy to visit with you afterwards.
It's in the House now. I'll take a look at it if it comes over to the Senate. I wouldn't be on that particular committee that deals with that, but some of these issues like that, Tom Green, it's kind of my advisor a little bit on that because he's on Health and Human Services. So.
Well, thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
We like to help veterans, and this past summer I was able to help the Louisa County veterans on some signage along with Representative Carlson, got him involved. So veterans are very important to us, and we support them fully if we can.
Just looking at this briefly, it seems like something that we should do and we need to do to take care of our veterans. So like I said, on the surface, I would be fully in support of it.
Thanks for bringing it forward, Shelley. I don't. It mentions hospitals, so I assume the Iowa Hospital Association
Yes, sir.
is probably out against it. Or
They are for it.
They are for it.
They are for it. Iowa Hospitalization is for it. They can incorporate it into Chapter 22,
Good.
into Iowa Code.
Well, that should help.
Yes,
that
sir.
Should help then. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. First time I've seen the bill. I'm not in the committee there, but it seems logical, and we'll see where it fits in the rest of the code, because I need to read what's before that section of the code and what's after that section of the code to really understand where it fits in the law.
Yes, sir.
But as written, it seems logical.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your support. Thank you, gentlemen.
Hi, my name is John Luth. First off, I just want to say thank you so much for each of you coming out today and for all the work that you guys do. I think there's a lot of evidence to see that the state is moving in the right direction, but there's always room for improvement. So can you just speak about the need for personal state income tax reform, particularly given that our rates are set to rise within or by next year?
Okay, thanks, John. Didn't you leave Muscatine? Didn't we need you to get back here? Okay, so
I'm working on it.
So quickly, everyone knows the federal government did pass tax reform, and so that affects Iowa because of Iowa having federal deductibility. So for those of you who may not be familiar with how that works, so if the federal government reduces their rates, so if you had an income of $30,000 and you were paying $2,000 in taxes and you had that reduction in the federal side, that means that your after tax that for Iowa tax is higher number. So if Iowa taxes don't adjust, you end up paying a higher tax for Iowa. And so a lot of our discussion is that the concept of federal tax reform was not for the state to get additional benefit in that. The benefit should accrue to the individual paid. So I think as we move forward with the session, we will be looking, first of all, it's trying to understand how that much revenue that impacts the state, but we will begin to look at making adjustments in Iowa tax code so that the intention of the federal tax reform is to allow it to flow to individuals.
Because of the federal tax reform, Iowa gets a so-called windfall. This current fiscal year, I think it's $11 million, something like that, or the estimate is. But the next year, it's like $100 million, or they're not sure, between 80 and $100 million. They're trying to figure out what it is next year. So I think it would be a good opportunity next fiscal year to look at that. If we're going to get additional, we might want to look at getting rid of federal deductibility and then lowering the rates. You wouldn't get rid of it unless you lowered the rates, but we might want to look at that because they've talked for years and years and years about how businesses trying to relocate to Iowa look at our tax system, and it looks higher than it is because we have federal deductibility. And maybe that's a change we ought to look at. So I think it's an opportunity to look at that, but we are going to get a $100 million sort of windfall next year, so we need to really study that closely.
Kind of amazes me that we see revenues going this and then down there, and spending's going up and down there. There's so much wave in how we look at money, how we spend money, how we generate money. I think the two greatest generators of state revenue are sales tax and personal income tax. So if you lower one, how are you going to keep up with the adequate funding for necessary services? So, it's a complicated issue. I don't think it's got easy solutions anywhere. And you hate saying, well, the projections are out here, but the realistic part's over here. This is where we get in this de-appropriation mess. You hate to last year say you're going to get X amount of dollars, and then, well, you're going to get X amount minus X amount. So it's a hard concept for most of the tax-paying citizens to grasp or understand. But believe me, I try to wrap my head around a lot of these numbers, and it makes your head swim. It's difficult, but I'm sure every one of us up here are dedicated to doing the best, trying to balance the dollars, and do what's best for all of those here in eastern Iowa.
Well, I think Representative Carlson and the Senator explained your answer really well. And as far as I'm concerned, anytime we can keep money in the taxpayers' pockets, that's what we need to do here in the state of Iowa.
We're trying to create an environment in Iowa that people want to locate here, businesses and people. And we're actually ranked 40th as far as the tax foundation and the study and how competitive we are as far as our tax structure. We probably pay average tax liability, but it's very complicated. So part of the reform that we've talked about is instead of 9 marginal brackets, maybe 4 brackets, that type of thing. But we actually have the 4th highest marginal, our highest marginal rate, which is just under 9%. That's the 4th highest one in the country. And then, and actually the threshold at the highest rate is 71,000. So we're not competitive. And I guess what Debbie Durham, the Director of Economic Development, she says, we don't have to be the best, we just need to be competitive. So if we could just try to move us up into the middle at least, I think that would make a difference, and that would help create that environment we're talking about.
I see, to make sure my hearing's not going, did I hear Senator Dvorsky say you'd be okay with lowering the corporate tax rate? I know. I'm just giving him grief. No, but he is right, though. Everybody's right so far that there is a windfall from the federal government tax plan. And I support, actually, Governor Reynolds' way of doing things she brought out in her State of the State, where she said that not only are we going to have this I believe our estimate is $116 million windfall, but also we've got about $500 million on autopilot when it comes to our tax credit system. And she's called for a complete bipartisan review of each and every one of those. If you're working tax credit and you're providing a return on investment to the state of Iowa, then we'll keep you. But if you're not, it might time to be on that chopping block. And the bottom line is that $116 million or whatever else it ends up being is your money. We see the effects of the federal tax cut. I know that it's not really particularly popular to actually see the facts from those that are just blindly political on the left, but the federal tax cuts are working, period. And so those $100 million, that's your money, and as far as I'm concerned, it'll be returned to you and not used to grow government.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Catherine Hahn, and I have to say I appreciate the help we've had on the issue that I'm concerned about, particularly with Gary. You've helped a tremendous amount. But I am the parent of a young man with severe disabilities. I work as a physical therapist in the schools with people with multiple disabilities, and I sit as an advisor on the Eastern Iowa Regional Mental Health Council. I have concerns gravely, and I came to ask you about your support of the Senate File 2013 and Senate File 2150, which looks at taking that long-term service support population and taking them away from the MCOs. I'm not sure at this point, because the system's basically been broken, what that looks like, but also taking case management and assessment away from the MCOs as well, because you cannot have the person profiting from the services that is also making the decisions on who gets the services. And most recently, with the exodus of AmeriHealth Caritas, we just got the letter in the mail the other day that my son's rate is being reduced. And we wonder whether he's going to be able to stay in the house that this community helped build for people with severe disabilities and who are medically fragile. So that's my question. Thanks.
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's a very timely one for me personally. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with the new Medicaid director. So I want to provide you with a little bit of hope, because I wouldn't normally be fluent in a lot of terms that you just brought up, because that's not my world. But because the meeting was just yesterday, are you familiar with the Village in West Branch?
I am not.
The
I am not.
The Village is a facility that takes care of extremely high needs, special needs individuals, and they made a very compelling case to the Medicaid director that those on the high end of services and needs, there's no money to be saved. And you're the ones that are being the most adversely affected. And I was pleasantly surprised. The Medicaid director looked him right in the eyes and said that he gets it, and that he is working towards that, making sure they're not in charge of the assessments, making sure that they're not the ones that are in charge of the savings. They actually brought the questions to us, and they were so vague. One of the questions was, is your special needs individual able to clean themselves after going to the bathroom? It was a yes or no. And if you actually said, well, partially, you were punished for it, because then they would say, well, you don't need the extra care. And so they made an excellent case to the new Medicaid director that population of people needs to be treated separately, is being adversely affected, and should go back to not necessarily the way things were, because that wasn't always sustainable, but treated as a different and unique population, and stop trying to fit a circle into a square peg. So I think you're going to see some positive changes.
That's nice to hear.
I'll look at Senate File 2013, I think you said. I was fortunate in the House. I was on Health and Human Services, so I was really in the middle of all that. I'm not now, but I'll take a look at it. And also, our government oversight meeting a couple weeks ago with Jerry Foxhoven, the Department of Health and Human Services director. We had both parties that felt pretty good about what he was saying. I know people that know him well and think a lot of him. So I think he's the right person to try to start solving the problems. Okay. I mean, everybody knows that with the MCOs, this hasn't gone very well. It's very, very obvious. I mean, I've gotten plenty of emails. I've had lots of conversations with people. So, but I do know they're trying, just like with the Medicaid new director too. I have not met like Bobby has, but anyway. So, but I appreciate your question on that.
Thank you.
You said 2013, and what was the other Senate?
Senate File 2013 and Senate File 2150. 2150 talks about case management and assessment being separate, which under the HCBS federal waiver, that is how it's supposed to be.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing them forward. I'm not familiar with the Senate bills being in the House right now, but you've hit on a topic that's statewide, just like water quality is a statewide issue. This is a statewide issue, too. So it needs to be addressed, and hopefully we can find a solution this year for something and move forwards on it. So thank you for your question, bringing it to my attention.
Throughout Senate District 44, I do not have one provider that has told me that the switch to the privatization has been a good thing.
I would agree with that.
I worry about the providers who are trying to do the billing and get paid for services. You know, they're deep in the red. Denial of payment, extensions of prior authorizations. It has not worked as promised. And I have told Governor Reynolds, her health care advisors, and Director Foxhoven that unless I see positive changes soon, I will be in favor of reverting back to Iowa Medicaid 2015.
Representative Kaufman and I were at the same meeting yesterday. This was at the Village Community, which is in Johnson County, but it's very close to West Branch. And they serve adult people with disabilities, and really have a unique operation. And it's probably one that ought to be, it could be a model for things across the state. So this was Mr. Michael Randall, who's the new Medicaid director for the state of Iowa. He had worked in Kansas with Medicaid, and he doesn't have a human services degree. His area is finance, so he's out driving around trying to meet with various people and find out what's going on in Iowa. He had met previously at Systems Unlimited in Iowa City before our meeting. And one of the questions I brought up is we have a contract with MCOs, right? And they're supposed to work for the state of Iowa, not the other way around.
I understand.
Didn't really appreciate that. But the whole point is I don't think the state really does a very good job of pushing the MCOs to go where the state wants them to go. I think we need a lot more effort there, and that he got the point. More effort there to make the MCOs, you know, actually be responsive once in a while and some of the things we do. And as Senator Green said, I mean, we just don't get any movement at all. One of the things he said he's going to tackle, he's got a task force that's trying to figure out how they're going to get paid on time and that kind of thing. And that's really important. He's got a couple other task force. So I think it sounds like hopefully he's going to make some changes. Whether or not he'll do that or not, I don't know. But Representative Kaufman was there, Representative Jacoby from Coralville, and Representative Rob Taylor from West Des Moines. So I think we had a good showing with legislators, and I think we made it clear to him that we needed him to start looking at the MCOs, moving things forward. They also looked at the assessment piece, and the idea of somebody coming in from an MCO and making the assessment, not having a objective one, doesn't make any sense. So hopefully he's aware of that, and hopefully he'll take into account all these things, and maybe we'll see some changes.
Hi, Kath. Well, we've talked many times
We did.
about Jeffrey, and most times we've been able to get it resolved.
We have.
And so,
And I certainly appreciate all the help you had, because Harmony is a unique situation as well.
So I met this week also with the new Medicaid director, and I've found that the conversation so far enlightening, and I'm glad to hear that he was out at West Branch, because he did assure that he was going to continue to go out into the field and look at operations. But I brought up the question in a group setting about the medically fragile, and also the frustration of the assessments, and you know, so many of these people, they're not changing from one quarter to the next. These are lifelong situations, and so it doesn't make sense. And also the frustration where doing an assessment when the information's already in the system. You know, why are we rehashing that issue? That seems to be you know, really a waste of time. Let's focus on the quality of service. So I'm encouraged by the direction they are looking, especially with the medically fragile community. And hopeful to have him come down, and you know, I think coming into Harmony House
I'd love
would
to have
be
that happen.
is a great example, and Muscatine is another example for him to see what works well with the medically fragile and having the services in our communities, rather than, you know, either forcing things to go back into the homes or to go in, you know, institutions that are further away. So I'm encouraged by some of the movement that I've seen under Director Foxhoven and the new Medicaid director, but there's more work to be done.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and certainly willing to be part of the solution if that happens.
Great.
Thanks.
Hello, I thank you all for being here, and you seem wise in all your thoughts, and thanks for sharing them. I'm here with sort of environmental hat on, and also for the state, thanking you for passing the water bill, but would like it to go a little bit further, and a nice path that we could get funding for the Outdoor Recreational Trust Fund that our state people have voted 69% for, is why don't we raise the sales tax a penny? A little of that would go into the trust fund, help with water, conservation and recreation, and it could alleviate some of the really tight funding priorities that you have now. So it seems like it could be a win-win, part of your tax reform. So if you think of tax reform, thinking of how many problems this could solve. And just knowing in our community, whether our employers are wanting to hire good people, which is difficult, the younger people, the employers, want recreation. They want outdoors. Great, they need skills, but you've got to get them there to make a strong community. And some of the funding for projects are from, okay, so encourage it. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, at least you're consistent on I will, and I appreciate that. So the issue of raising the sales tax, while it seems so simple and so obvious, and that would fund the trust, the fact is that there are still many people that have reservations about raising the sales tax. One of the most common things is about the sales tax being a regressive tax as well, and so there's still that resistance. And then within I will, the formula and the allocations and how those allocations and how much of that allocation will really go to water quality versus going into other projects. There is continuing the discussion about how that might look and change as a result of the tax reform. In other words, as a comprehensive look at tax reform, is there some sense to make a change there if there's a reduction somewhere else, for instance? So I would say there's more encouraging discussion about it. I will say the more emphasis, in at least in discussion stage, regarding sales tax this year is extension of SAVE for the education side than there is on I will. Now you might say, well, that's not an additional sales tax, but it is a sales tax that's set to sunset, and yet there's a critical need in K-12 funding for that. And so I will just say more discussion I've heard is about extending SAVE this session than in increasing additionally the sales tax that would fund I will.
To SAVE, I understand there's a deal. Supposedly, the Iowa Association of School Boards has come up with a deal to extend SAVE, so we'll see what happens with that. So I hope that occurs. I think we need to look at that again, maybe in the context of taxes. One of the interesting things thinking about retirement is that one of the things I think about is sort of this, I call it the constant thing, that there's some people who are always there, always promoting things and doing. You're one of those, and I appreciate that there's some people you see all the time that for years they're there and they're promoting their efforts, and I appreciate that. So, but I understand Representative Wills has got a bill now in the House to maybe do a little bit more on water quality, so I'm anxious to see what that does. One of the things we didn't do in water quality is we're not monitoring anything there. So, I mean, you're just sort of taking money out, throwing it around and saying nice, but no idea what that's done or no accountability or no monitoring. So maybe we can work on that.
I think we all agree that preservation of our natural resources is an important part to having the quality of life that we all expect and deserve. If we raise the sales tax 1 penny, there have been estimates of how much that would generate every year. $400 million? We could do an awful lot with $400 million, couldn't we? So I think that is an option, but then generally once you assess a tax, it never goes away. It's always there. Like Senator Dvorsky says, I would be much more in favor of the extension of the sales tax. Our schools obviously need additional funds. But it does come to mind that there was a school in the Des Moines area that just built just shy of $90 million for a new high school. Unbelievable, you know. So do we need to review that process a little bit? I suppose if they can float that through their citizens, and if the state's only going to give you so much and they're going to increase their property taxes so much to pay for a $90 million high school. We built a new hospital in Burlington for $109 million. Yet they're going to spend $90 million on a high school. So priorities are there, obviously. You know, I think Johnston did. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we could all use that another $400 million. I would love to have that in our coffers, but the pie is only so big. I wish we would have a magical formula to generate additional tax revenue, keep more families here, grow our families, provide good job opportunities, and I think it's just a process. And Let's hope we've bottomed out last year and we're starting to climb out of that. So here we go.
Well, it's interesting that the I will 3/8%. I'm starting to hear some pushback against it in the rural areas, which I serve. 88, District 88 is more rural. Muscatine I believe, has a need for it for trails in this. But there's people out in the rural areas that says who's going to maintain them, who's going to cost. You've got to explain a whole thing about the process to them back again, and what the benefits are and what the benefits aren't. Economic development here in Louisa County, or not here in Louisa County, but in Louisa County for trails, I think would be a great option, or a great potential for the county. But there's just starting to be that little pushback. We haven't had it yet, so don't vote for it. So I'd like to see the 1 cent save penny go through and have to rethink the I will right now. It has merit, but then again, it's not gotten done, so people don't think it's necessary too. So there's that thinking out there too, I think in the more of the rural areas. So, but thank you. It's a very interesting question, and why hasn't it been done? That's lots of things. Water quality could have been done 8 years ago when they first started realizing we need to do something with water quality too. So it happens slowly.
Gary brought up the formula, and that's the same. In the Senate, I hear a lot of conversation about looking at the formula again. I think maybe if that would be resolved, maybe we would have a little more, pressure to go forward on that. If we did raise the sales tax in Iowa, the problem would be is that we'd have the highest sales tax of all the surrounding states around us, and that makes people concerned too. So,
Sarah, I appreciate the question. You remember my WISE bill last year that had 10 Republican co-sponsors, so you know where my heart is. I'm not a fan of the raging incrementalism that is Des Moines. That's just not my personality. I understand the need for it because you don't want a fast track option for bad things as much as we do want a fast track option for good things. I'm working on a very significant, large plan with Representative Wills that's going to take multiple years. It will not happen this year. But I just want to shop it to people, and it directly answers your question. You know, I call it the $1 billion plan, and I know Walter's going to throw a pie at me when with my time's up, so just cut me off, Walter. But I know you will. Well, I'm more afraid of her than you, so. Got it. So we've got $116 million prospective windfall next year from the federal tax plan. We've got a half a billion dollars in current tax credits and tax checks we're writing out, as well as the $400 million that would be raised by the sales tax penny. And within that plan, you know, the first 3/8 goes to I will, of course. But I'm trying to revamp our tax system so it's not so damn complicated. And right now, property taxpayers are unduly burdened by the fact that our mental health services are not nearly what they should be, yet that's where the funding comes from. So if we were able to redirect those funds, we would be able to completely pay for mental health, and that would be a property tax reduction, as well as establish a mental health pool of funding for children, because right now children don't have very good mental health services. It would also allow us to give us the flexibility to lower our income taxes and our corporate tax rate, because we're not picking and choosing with tax credits. So this is a huge plan that it is raging incrementalism, but it's what I'm pushing. Is that okay, Walter?
Good morning. My name is Heidi Harrison. I'm here on behalf of Survivor Services. More specifically, I am the legal advocate for the domestic violence program in Muscatine and Louisa counties. So I serve 2 different judicial districts. My primary job is no contact orders. So I'm in the courthouses a lot, and I have heard some rumblings that some of the smaller rural courthouses are going to be merging. And so my question is that going to be taking place? And if it does, would the courthouses merge within their same judicial district?
We had a conversation with the court administrators who I believe did a disservice to the people by scaring people with the reaction to that Senate budget proposal. I completely and adamantly oppose those courthouse services being removed, and I do not think you're going to see that happen. I also, to be fair to the senators up here who made the proposal, I believe that a lot of the fault lies in how the court system reacted with the threat of those closures rather than how it was actually going to happen. In fact, the individual that's in charge of that had a meeting with the speaker and the majority leader and actually apologized. So I do not believe you're going to see any services close. And as far as the domestic violence funds, I've got a great shelter over in my district over in Iowa City, which I'm sure you're very well aware of. The investment return on the dollars that we invest, the things that they're able to do with such a small amount of money. Last year, I vehemently opposed that cut in the justice budget, and I've already had a conversation with Gary Worthen, who chairs that committee this year. It is such a small amount of money, and the good that it does, it should be completely reinvested this year.
Thank you.
I'm the vice chair of local government, and we haven't even talked about that. But it could be. The thing is, there's a lot of issues that are basically go in a lot of different committees rather. So I, like I said, I'll have to ask a little bit more about that and find out.
Well, thank you for serving Louisa County in my district. Yes, I found that I think 30 or 33 thought they could close and make it work. They're so essential to the communities that they serve and the counties that they serve. So I would be very much against that. We need them. And also, Mr. Representative Kaufman just mentioned about the money that's been taken out, refunding, rebuilding that fund up for domestic violence. I think it's a great idea. It's we need it. It's just that's the bottom line. We just need the service to help protect.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, please, gentlemen, but doesn't Iowa code require that they can't close a courthouse? I mean, consolidation might be a better word. You know, we have 99 counties in Iowa. We do have 100 courthouses.
Yes. We used to have 101.
Did we? Yeah. Lee County, Keokuk, Fort Madison. There's a courthouse in Fort Madison. There's a courthouse in Keokuk. So I think consolidation, just like school districts. Yeah. At one time, we had over 600 school districts in the state of Iowa. Today, we have 330 some, I think, believe. So consolidation is probably a better word, but I think the counties were set up so that was within 1 day's ride on a horse to get to the courthouse. You know, maybe it's time we do take a serious look at that, but I really don't see closure of any courthouses on the near future.
One of the things that, and I guess as having been appropriations chair, maybe that's the reason I understand it, but if you go back to your grade school civics, right, you have 3 different and equal branches of government. You have the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. So the courts are supposed to be an equal branch of government, and I don't think we pay attention to that enough, you know. So we're talking about cutting 30 counties, services in 30 counties. One of the things, it's a little misleading, in I think last year or 2 years ago, there were 7 or 8 counties that didn't have a court case in any of those counties. I mean, that's actually true. So it's, you know, the cuts still aren't going to be good, and we're really cutting the courts way too much to provide the services they're mandated to offer. So I hope we'll look at that and try and restore some of those cuts for the courts, because it makes no sense. As far as the counties, like 91 and 92, I was chair of local government in the Iowa House. That's just to give you the context. And while I looked into that, counties are actually in the Constitution. They're in the Constitution. They're in there by the borders. So you'd have to change the Constitution to change the 99 counties in Iowa. I mean, that's amazing. So there are ways to do it, though. We talked about it, and over the years we have done that. So if you wanted to have sharing of different offices in the counties and that kind of thing, we have those open. They're not forced. They're just permissive to allow you to combine offices. And over all these years, you're allowed to combine offices. You know how many have combined offices in 99 counties? 2. And I think it's Marshall County. They've combined the auditor and recorder. And my friend Pat Gill, who I used to serve with in the Iowa House, who's the auditor in Woodbury County. They combined the auditor and recorder. But you could actually do that if you wanted to in permissive fashion. So we put in place all those things. They're on the books. There's just no political will to do that. But the other question you had is talking about domestic violence, and we have DVIP in Iowa City that does a great job. But we have cut those and cut them. I get that. This is important, though. They've cut those and cut those. And anyone up here who says they support domestic violence, you better look and see how much they're going to cut again on the DIA probe and how much they're going to cut next year. Because it's horrible what you've done to them. Way beyond anything else anybody's cut. They talked about 40% cut when they went in, ended up at like 25%. These other areas aren't getting cut that much. There's no reason to do that whatsoever. So I think people ought to pay attention to that, do something about it.
Thank you.
So I think the issue about the closing the 30 courthouses came as a result of the Senate appropriations bill that they passed out for the budget, and the cut to the judicial system. And the judicial system said if we had that type of cut, we would have to temporarily close up to 30 courthouses to be able to absorb that cut, not permanently cut those. I think that was the issue, as I recall. I don't believe, first of all, that the ultimate budget that is passed, or the allocation bill is passed, will cut judiciary as much as the Senate bill. I'll start with that point first. The issue, though, it's kind of a higher issue, is about counties overall and the changing demographics that we are seeing in the state of Iowa. It's not unique to Iowa, it's in the other parts of the country too, but this whole urbanization. So we have crossed the threshold today where more than 50% of Iowans live in 10 counties, which is adversely putting a lot of pressure in a number of rural counties and their ability to continue to have all the services without doing more of the things that Senator Dvorsky talked about that allows for more consolidations. It's not so much the closing of the courthouses, it's consolidation of services, sharing of services, whatever. But the population change, when not only that high percentage in the 10 counties, it's continuing to accelerate. And so, you know, we can't also, as a state, put our head in the sand also as to what that is ultimately going to make for our 99 counties.
Yep. Well, okay.
Yeah, I know. Way back when, as I said, local government chair, 91, 92, we actually passed something called Community Commonwealth form of government, where you could actually combine services of cities and county services. And it's still on the books. Unfortunately, they tried it in Polk County, which was the wrong thing to do. They should have tried it in a smaller county first. They tried it in Polk County, and they made one mistake. We're going to have nonpartisan elections for county government as part of that, and that killed the whole idea. But it's still in place. You could put that in place, and it actually makes a lot of sense. So there are a lot of things out there. It just takes political will.
And while we're on the subject of closures, the witching hour is just about ready to approach. So we will have, what we're going to go is proceed to final remarks by the legislators and thank everybody for your questions. So go ahead, Representative Carlson.
All right, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for the Muscatine Community College and the Chamber for again sponsoring this event. You know, one of the things, and Senator Green mentioned it first about Senator Dvorsky, you know, there are times that we have partisan issues, there's no doubt about that, and we have different agreements. But I've had the opportunity in my short time in the House to work with Senator Dvorsky fairly often on a number of issues. And, you know, the one in Cedar County that Representative Kaufman mentioned was a good example of that. So here's a guy that's not going to run for re-election, and yet we've got issues that need to be addressed in Cedar County, and he was there at the meeting. He and Representative Kaufman and me and 60 of our new friends of citizens that were complaining about the issue. But then when we had follow-up meetings with the Department of Transportation, and I chair transportation, so it's easy for me to help call those meetings, he was there too at that. And I really think, and we got a good result, which is even more important because we had a logical explanation to the DOT as to why a draft of a concept, and it wasn't a new law or a new policy change, but a draft of a concept, why it did not make sense. And we got that done. And we got that done in a bipartisan way. Oftentimes you don't see some of that. Those aren't the things that oftentimes get reported when we are working closely together to try to resolve a problem that affects our constituents and affects the state of Iowa. So personally, I'm going to miss Senator Dvorsky, because no bill that you pass in the House becomes law unless you can also pass it in the Senate, unless the governor will sign that. And so you do have to be able to work with somebody, and I appreciate the opportunity to have worked with Senator Dvorsky, and I think we should all thank him for the service, but he's not done yet.
Thank you. I should probably quit while I'm ahead, but one of the things that somebody noted in an editorial a couple years ago is that Bob's worked together, Senator Representative Kaufman and I, and we do try and work together. I also try and work with Representative Jacoby. Those are my other representatives, so I think that's really important. Going into my last session, I was thinking, well, how should I handle this? But going into the session, I just decided, well, do it like you've always done it. You still have a year left to represent your constituents and do the best you can. So that's what I'm attempting to do. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for your questions.
Again, thank you all very much. I enjoy these exchange of ideas. We need to hear from you. What are the important issues? We can all be reached via our legislative emails or our cells or cell numbers. So please, if you have an individual issue and you haven't had the opportunity to ask us as a group, please get in touch with us. We will do the best we can. Like Representative Carlson and Senator Dvorsky have said here, a lot of these issues are strictly nonpartisan, whether it's mental health, community, the community well-being, public safety, transportation, schools. These are not partisan issues. We're all trying to do our best with limited funding, and I think every one of us will continue to do that. Thank you again for coming.
Well, thank you for coming, and I appreciate the senator and also Representative Cahoon that came in. I think you said the same time. The longevity of these people and the history that they have is remarkable. Everything that they've been through over the years. Representative Cahoon, I'm a little more familiar with him, and we talk, and he can tell me past history of a bill, and he can tell me past history of a legislator and how he's worked with them and how he's not worked with people on certain issues. So thank you for bringing attention to some issues that I'm not aware of, like the Senate files, which I'll have to look into, and just a little bit on bipartisanship. Out of the House last year, 87 to 88% of the bills were bipartisan, which is remarkable because you only hear about the 12 or 13% that make the headlines. So you know how to get a hold of me at the legislator if you have an issue, need help. So thank you again.
At the last forum, I'm going to do a 15-minute speech about Bob Dvorsky, but I won't do it now. So, but anyway, I appreciate the college, MCC, putting this on, and also the chamber, getting the word out to everybody. So, we haven't even done any bills on the floor of the Senate yet. We've done subcommittees and committees meetings and stuff. So, actually, this week, that will all kind of start up.
Well, since I'm the last one, I guess that means Walter can't cut me off anymore. But all right, so we're going to do a half-hour speech on the economy. No, but anyway, as you can see, I've gotten over my trademark shyness issue, so thanks for working me through with that. No, but I want to touch base on a few things that members up here have said, as well as a few of the issues to wrap up. What Senator Green said is exactly right. You know how to get a hold of us. In fact, if many of you saw me texting up here, it was not recreational. I'm dealing with a mother who's having trouble getting services for her child in managed care, and she and I and one of the providers were texting back and forth this morning. So we do our best to try to be responsive to you. And Representative Kerr brought up an excellent point, and I'll give you even more numbers on that. 203 bills passed the Iowa House last year. 179 of them were bipartisan. Only 24 bills passed with only Republican votes. Now, that's not newsworthy, so you don't see that in the news. You only see when we fight. but 179 out of 203 of our bills are bipartisan, and most of the work we do up there couldn't be done without friendships across the aisle like you've all seen us profess our love for Senator Dvorsky today. I am excited for this session. I think that you're going to see major progress in managed care. The Medicaid director and the new director of DHS is doing excellent work. I think you're going to see with the governor's emphasis on mental health, I think you're going to see significant increases in mental health. The education package that we're bringing out has got a lot of support so far, making sure that community colleges are able to have the funds to administer the programs that they do so well. And then that EMT bill that I brought up, I think is critically important so that our ambulance services are not getting their budgets gutted each time they make a Medicaid call. And then in closing, I just want to say that as your government oversight chair, the top investigative committee in the state, anyone that attempts to misuse your tax dollars in the way that the ICN directorate has will be held accountable, and I'll keep you all updated on it. So thanks for having us.